I know that you wrote a recent article in JAMA about markers for myeloma, and it was a very provocative article. Could you just summarize that article for me?
Yeah, we did a large study based on the NCI PLCO prospective cancer screening trial published in JAMA Oncology 2019. We had access to almost 100,000 people. This is a follow-up study from the one we did in 2009, at that point together with Dr. Kyle and his group at Mayo. So in this 2019 version, we tracked changes of serum immune markers year by year in more than 200 people who developed myeloma and in more than 400 individuals who stayed stable with monoclonal gammopathy or MGUS for 10 or so years, to look to see if you could actually identify changes in the blood before myeloma happens. And the key findings are that in the patients who have myeloma, they previously had a monoclonal gammopathy, obviously. We have shown that before. We also show that if you have high-risk signatures, as stipulated in this paper, there's a lot of detail I won't go through now. If you have certain features, that's when you are likely to progress. But if you look a year or two before you were high risk, you were low risk. So high risk is always preceded by low risk. Yeah. But if you stay low risk the whole time, that's when you don't progress. So I think a key message really is the dynamics of the markers. So we used to say this patient is high risk, this patient is low risk, but that's wrong. The risk can unfortunately change. It can only change in one direction. It can only go from low risk to higher risk. So I think clinically it's important to know that you check these markers, the protein electrophoresis, the immunofixation, the serum free light chains, and the quantitative immunoglobulins. And if you see that the markers are stable over time, that is the strongest clinically known predictor of non-progression. Mm-hmm. While you see the changes occurring, they can actually go on, we show in this study, up to 5 years before myeloma happens. There is a group of patients, 5 to 10%, where the changes was around a year or so. So most patients takes a long time, but some patients have shorter. The last very important clinical message from this study is that in the past we didn't really know if this so-called smoldering myeloma was an intermediate step between monoclonal gammopathy and multiple myeloma. We always felt that this is probably not true because this definition for this so-called smoldering myeloma is quite artificial. So what the study shows is if you have people with monoclonal gammopathy and you follow them year by year in the blood, only 20% of patients will have an M spike that's 3 grams per deciliter or more. So that means that only 20% of patients, based on your blood work, will fall into smoldering myeloma before they develop multiple myeloma. The other 80% of the patients who go from monoclonal gammopathy to multiple myeloma, they go right from monoclonal gammopathy right into myeloma based on blood work. So if you're sitting waiting for smoldering myeloma, there's an 80% probability that that will not happen in those patients who will develop myeloma anyway. So don't believe in this threshold for the monitoring. You have to look at all the other markers and stay on top of the game and probably do new bone marrow biopsy if there are changes.
Yeah. If I was told I had smoldering myeloma, I would think that would be worse than MGUS, but I would be wrong, right? Your chances of getting myeloma would be less.
Well, there could be patients with smoldering myeloma that's stable. The risk could probably be the same as the monoclonal gammopathy, but the changing pattern, that's what is kind of an indicator of progression. So if you have change in the markers, you have to reassess. You could say this patient used to be low risk. No, it's a high risk. And if that continues to happen, that's indicative of myeloma is about to happen.